Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I am back taking another look at Anvil Magazine number 2, and we're going to try and get through everything else in this video. Just got a couple of thoughts about each story in here, but first some general remarks about the magazine, because this is something I do like to talk about the form factor, and there is an interesting wrinkle to this one, because I know Anvil Magazine number 1 was printed at one location, and then due to some issues with that printer, a new printer was used for this one. So the real question here is, how much did the quality of the product change? And the answer is not really at all. It is about the same quality as the last one. If there is any difference to the materials or the methodology, I can't detect it. And the two printers seem to have handled them with the same level of care, which was very professional in the first volume and continues to be so in this volume. And it's good to see that we are at a point where small publishers like this are able to maintain this level of quality across the board. Now, there were some management issues that made the previous printer a challenge to work with, but they gave a very good physical product, and this product is just as good. I like it. It has a very good paper quality. It will hold up very well to thumbing through it repeatedly. You can take this and drop it in a doctor's office or something like that if you want to leave it out somewhere where people tend to read magazines. And it will hold up to a lot of reading. So very good, very nice quality. I also have to compliment the color printing in here. There are a number of color illustrations and two color comics, excuse me, and they all look very strong. So really good stuff there. Just a minor note that I noticed, and I don't know if this is formatting or what, every so often there is an odd double space in the middle of the typology, the typesetting. And I don't know if that's a formatting thing. Maybe the printers use different formatting software or what. It seems completely random. It doesn't seem to have like any meaning or significance. Possibly it is some kind of Morse code for an ARG. That would actually be really cool. But it looks random to me, okay? So I don't think there's anything special going on with that. I suspect maybe there's just some kind of glitch in formatting that may need to be worked out. It's a very minor thing. It just caught my eye, and it bears mentioning. Magazine itself, this is a horror-themed or creature feature-themed magazine. Solicitations were sent out specifically for creepy stories. And that's fitting. It's coming out at Halloween. Now, your mileage may vary because I've noticed that horror is a very particular genre for people. Myself, I find some kinds of horror kind of interesting. I find other kinds of horror very unengaging. I'm going to try and be as upfront and honest about that as I can. Most of these stories do have a creepy factor to them, but most of them are not particularly gory or in your face. So, let's take a quick look at the different kinds of stories in here. The first story after Morning Light, which I've already discussed in my previous video, is Blades Against Fear by Eric Wagg. And before I get too deep into that, let's talk about the illustrators, because they do some good work in this, and I like to acknowledge them. We have Luke Eidenschnitt. If I mispronounce anyone's name, my apologies. He illustrated Morning Light, and he has a very nice painterly style. Joe San did the Prowler of Blog Square. Very heavy blacks, very impressive kind of gothic comic book art that I really enjoyed. Nathan J. Melendez illustrated Afflicted. Afflicted has a subtitle in French that I can't pronounce, so I'm just going to call it Afflicted through the course of this review. The art there is very impressive, very expressive, even though it's just in black and white. There's a lot done with hatching and line weights. Very impressive. Finally, we have Andy Radburn, who did Ghost of a Distant Star. Again, this is an interesting comic book style. It is a little less realistic than Josan, but it is still very expressive. It fits the story very well. I believe Jake Collada, is that right? Let me back here. Yeah, Jacob Collada did a really good job in the art direction and graphic design of this. I presume, since he is credited as the graphic designer, he at least did the layout. I don't know if Richard commissioned the artists and worked with them or if it was Jacob, but either way, very good work here. Very impressive stuff. Okay, back to Blades Against Fear. Blades Against Fear is a very simple story about some people who meet on the road, and one of them tells the others about a monster they've encountered. And as you might expect from that kind of setup, eventually that monster makes itself known and they have to deal with it. This is a very tense story. It has a lot of issues with travel and hospitality and meetings on the road and navigating all those things. These were very important things, especially in the medieval and earlier time period. And there is a lot of richness stories set there. There's a lot of clever thinking, information that is carefully husbanded by the characters and deployed when necessary. And there's a really great action scene at the end. I think Eric did a great job with this story. Clearly had his premise in mind, and he executed on it very well. This particular story is the kind of thing I enjoy. I enjoy these kind of sort of folk hero or local hero versus monster stories. I enjoy them a fair bit. And I think this one does a great job managing expectations, making connections for the reader, and telling you a little bit about the characters you're dealing with. And it's very interesting that the heroes of the story are not the first set of characters we meet. Instead, we meet the bystanders, for lack of a better term. And I thought that that introduction of them later on does a good job of keeping us guessing about what's going on. Because I think if we got it from their point of view, we would have had a much clearer idea of what we were actually dealing with as the story goes on. So the structure here is very well done to keep us in suspense, but also give us enough of the story to start making informed guesses on our own. That's something that really appeals to me. Not necessary, of course, especially when you're dealing with horror. But like I said, horror is very hit and miss, especially for me, because a lot of stuff, especially in the horror genre, is not exactly my cup of tea. So right off the bat, we have a story I really liked. The Prowler of Blog Square by Micah Murray is in the same vein. Have a local hero, or perhaps it doesn't seem to be a mercenary. We hear him given the title of doctor, but I'm not exactly sure who or what Sebastian actually is. I don't think it's actually entirely necessary for the story. He comes under the appearance of a doctor. Maybe that's actually what he does. Maybe it's not. He seems to be very well educated. He's very on top of things. Structurally, I think this story is very good. Again, we have a setup. He comes to a town. There's a monster in the town. It's not initially clear that this is the monster we're dealing with, which is a nice well, if we didn't have it made very clear on the cover that there was actually a monster coming, that would be a nice way to build tension. And this is something interesting about editorially trying to put together a magazine like this. You want something really eye-catching on your cover, and sometimes getting that really eye-catching moment means you have to maybe lower suspense. There are a lot of people who insist all covers for books or any other kind of fiction should be something from the story. But I really understand why you may choose not to do that, because it does sometimes exist tension with creating your pacing, creating drama, creating suspense. In this case, I don't know. It's already appearing in a creature feature issue of the magazine. So I don't know if you gain as much trying to maintain that sense of suspense. It is one of those weird, interesting editorial challenges that you have to think about while you're assembling something like this. In this case, I don't think not knowing there was a monster in this town when Sebastian arrives would have made the story any more or less suspenseful. Because at the very least, the locals think there's a large dog like a wolf, or maybe even some kind of prehistoric dire wolf stalking the streets of their town. So that's already almost a monster. And I think making it clear that, it's another kind of monster is fine. But your mileage may vary. Again, this is a very subjective genre, and it's difficult to talk about because of that. So we have a lot of clever stuff going on here. Sebastian sets up his plan, and then because he's not dealing with a dog, he has to improvise and alter his plan. I like all of that. That's very good. It shows the character's intelligence. It shows his adaptability. Uh, the one thing I don't like that I'm not sure how much of what we get in the first half of we don't really get a lot of internal dialogue for the characters, but it seems as if Sebastian is initially expecting that what the villagers tell him is the case, that there is a large dog here. And then in the middle of the story, we get a sudden pivot where he seems to have been actually hunting this monster. And I'm not sure if he came expecting the monster to be there, if he just considered it a possibility or what. It was a little confusing. And I think writing the first half so we did not, so it was clear we weren't getting Sebastian's internal thoughts might have made that less. I don't know. This is, I'm not critiquing a story after the fact. It's hard to tell exactly what the author is doing here. And I'm not sure whether I was supposed to take away the impression that Sebastian was so invested in his work. He just wasn't considering this other possibility he already knew about or what. It makes it very hard to get a read on whether the character is behaving honestly with the townspeople at first or whether he's running a con on them. It makes it hard to completely parse his motive. That is a minor issue. I think that structurally, it would be more satisfying if we had a clear idea of whether these thoughts, whether the thoughts expressed in the narration are Sebastian thoughts or not. It is a third-person limited perspective, so it's kind of hard to tell. All in all, that's not a knock on the story. Very, very much. I mean, every structural issue is kind of an issue with a story, but I don't think it really hurts the story a lot. It kind of creates a moment of confusion where he goes from this plan to deal with a dog to all of a sudden, or this monster by this name. Oh, okay. I thought you were dealing with a dog, though. Just a little confusing. These are small things. Immortal Rising, Baphomet's Child. This is written by Aaron C. With art by Jose Garcia. And says Amy Fusco credits. I'm not sure if that means she's the typesetter and she made this credit page, or I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't think I've actually ever encountered that per se in a comic context. Maybe it means she was like a whole bunch of different things, and then art was done by Jose and Aaron did the writing. I'm a little bit of a question mark there. Not a big issue. Jose Garcia is actually the artist of Crimson Wren of the True North, and if you've seen my video on that, I think his art is very good. And we have very good art here as well. Here's the first page if you're curious what it looks like. I'm not going to show you any more than that. It is a very short story, and I don't want to give too much away. But this is very different from his art in Crimson Wren, and I'm impressed by the difference in art styles that we see from this. This has a lot of heavy blacks. It's a very moody art. There's not a whole lot of that pastel coloring that we saw in Crimson Wren. Very strong and evocative. This is about a guy who fights evil, supernatural evil, not a investigator or something like that. He uses a magic amulet to do this. We don't know what all the powers of the amulet are, but we do know it lets him confront evil in its own realm, and that is the key to his powers. He has a really cool battle, and it's very visually impressive. It has a narrative device where we're kind of switching back and forth between the realm of evil, where our hero is battling, and the physical realm, where we see the victim of evil, who is currently being exorcised exorcised, for lack of a better term. Our hero is working to save this girl's soul from the clutches of Baphomet. It's very intense. The only critique I have for this, the switches between the two realms are often very abrupt, and it took me a minute to be, okay, there are visual cues for whether we are in the spirit realm or not, but sometimes they weren't 100% obvious. And I would have to stop and look back at a panel again and be like, okay, wait, okay, this is in the spirit realm, and okay, this guy doesn't have a beard, which can be hard to tell in the heavy shadows sometimes. All in all, the story is quite good, quite strong and exciting, and minor art issues, they aren't really that big of a deal. It was, just there is a coloring cue, for whether we're in the spirit world or not, that I think could have been played up a little bit more, just to make those things read a little bit faster. This is, again, a minor tweak that could have been made. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. I think if there were more Immortal Rising comics to come, and there may be, as number one, maybe thinking about playing that up a little bit more might be something to keep in mind. But this one, it reads pretty well. After that, we have the review of Black Crown, which, again, with the previous version of this issue of this magazine, I'm not going to talk about the reviews. The reviews are just reviews of fiction, and you really need to know a reviewer and be able to understand the perspective they're coming from to get a lot out of a review. I think it's better to let those stand on their own than go over them to any greater extent. So there it is. There's a couple of reviews in here. They seem very straightforward and easy to grasp. What more could you ask for from a review? Really don't need anything more than that. That brings us to Afflicted by Jamie Faye Orkelson. Afflicted starts with a dead body, which is a fantastic opening for a story. It really grabs me quickly. We spend the entire story investigating a dead body, actually a string of dead bodies as the story goes on. And we are traveling with a woman who is afflicted. She is kind of a herald or clergy woman of the god of death. Has a nearly unpronounceable name. I'm sure there's someone out there who looked at that name and immediately knew how to say it out loud. I'm not that guy, so I'm not going to try and say it. But we have this god of death and decay, and also of disease. The afflicted are his heralds, and they have a power to kind of treat disease and sense when it's present and when it's not present. And this, combined with her understanding of basic medicine and forensics, makes her a very good person to investigate this series of deaths, because they all seem to be caused by a supernatural plague. And since she is in touch with the god of plague, she's pretty certain that it doesn't come from him, which makes squashing it, making sure no one is messing around on his turf, one of her responsibilities. This is a very interesting motivation for a character, and it is explored a little bit, as are her reasons for becoming one of these afflicted. We get just a taste of this, which is fine, because the story is not actually about either of those things. The story is about solving the mystery, and the mystery is very well constructed. I am a sucker for mystery stories. I think Afflicted is probably my favorite story in this issue of Anvil. I really enjoyed the investigation. I enjoyed the main character interacting with all the different people in this city and trying to work out all the puzzle pieces and what to do about those puzzle pieces once you had them all in place. The story moves very quickly, but not so quickly that we feel we're being rushed to a conclusion. There's a couple of red herrings. There's a lot of interesting side characters. She actually investigates with, in part, with the member of another deity's clergy, which is an interesting dynamic. Actually, if there's one thing that I am most interested in seeing more of, it would be the interactions between this afflicted character and some of these other clergy members and small local officials. I think that is a very rich vein to tap in future stories. All in all, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the hook. I enjoyed the pacing of the plot progression. And I really didn't see anything out of place, anything that hit my ear wrong. Very impressive work. And the illustrations do a great job of just highlighting key moments. Like, here's one of the illustrations there. This is very dramatic, black and white, which is very fitting, I think, for the kind of work that the main character does. Great storytelling. After that comes The Shadowed Canal by Nate Chen. Excellent story that is worth the price of admission, if you ask my opinion, but I wrote it, so expecting. Corpse Fishers is next. This is another comic. It has this really fascinating style. I'm not sure what the best description for this is. It is very painted. It is very heavy. It's sparse on details and heavy on menace, which is very appropriate for this story, which is about people who dive into the underworld of what is not our world for sure, and they find pods with more of their own kind of people in them. They try and revive those people from those pods, and maybe they dive too greedily. And this story is very light on details, and it just gives you enough world building, enough character, and enough menace to understand that there's something really bad going on here. For me personally, little teases like that, they don't really send the chill down the spine the way I know it does for a lot of people. I kind of think of this as an SCP style story. If you like a short SCP that just has a couple of details that are kind of menacing in the implications, you are going to love Corpse Fishers. If you're one of those people who reads the SCP files and you want to find a lot of interview transcripts and exploration logs and that kind of stuff, you probably won't get as much out of Corpse Fishers. I really enjoyed the art. It's very powerful and evocative. The story itself did not hit me very good, but this is horror. Your mileage is going to vary a lot. And I know there are people out there who love this kind of horror. So if you are one of those guys who likes that sparse, momentary glimpses of detail that will haunt you, Corpse Fishers is probably going to be your thing. Ghost of a Distant Star by J.D. Cohen is an interesting blend of sci-fi exorcism. And just like Afflicted, begins with a very strong conflict. In this case, a ghost coming and sitting down across the main character. That is, again, is a great hook for me. For me, that no setup, instant hard cut to this is our main conflict, almost always going to have my attention for at least a page. And in this case, Cohen keeps my attention for the whole story. We're following an enforcer who has heard reports of a ghost on this train. And what is an enforcer? They appear to be some kind of roving lawman. If you're familiar with Mitty Coleman or some of these other stories of knights errant, essentially, who travel around and they just sort of solve problems with a kind of semi-official sanction from the state or the king, that seems to be what an enforcer is. Never get it spelled out for us, but I think implication is there, and I'm willing to run with that in this story. It is interesting to me that our enforcer seems familiar enough with ghosts to fight against them. He comes wearing a cross and some other weapons to fight against them, but he's also not so superstitious that he immediately believes the ghost. He goes about trying to prove this in a very intelligent fashion. And I know there is a tendency in the modern era to look at things like ghosts and witch hunts as very superstitious and arbitrary. But if you actually read up on the way these things have traditionally been handled, they are very deliberate and not necessarily scientific, but reasonable. I like that we see our enforcer like that. Sorry about the cut there. Something went haywire in my camera. I probably lost about 30 seconds of video, but I think we're back now and we're okay. So, as we were leaving off, we were talking about our enforcer, kind of a knight errant. He's been investigating this ghost, and he comes and he deals with it in a very straightforward way. He's looking to make the world more just, and I think he accomplishes that. This is not anything groundbreaking, but it is a very fun confrontation to see between this ghost and the enforcer, and come away with a very good sense of what the enforcer is capable of and what he's willing to do. He's not just there to arbitrarily create justice. He wants to know the truth too. He's looking for that as well. And I like that about the character as well. Cruel Creation by T.J. Marquis is a kind of reverse creature feature, by which I mean we are told the story from the perspective of the creature rather than by those menaced by the creature. It's a very short story. It looks like it's about 5 or 6 pages, and it moves very quickly. Get in the head of this monster. We understand a little bit about how it thinks. It's in a scenario. It gets itself out of the scenario. There are a lot of people who are menaced and killed along the way. Whether you enjoy that or not is very much going to be personal taste. This is not the kind of thing I usually go in for, but there is a twist in here that I thought was very cleverly set up and well executed. So if you like the kind of reverse creature feature scenario I described to you, you're probably going to find this story to be a lot of fun. Soulless City, written by Brian Asher and illustrated by Bat Sky Starman. And I hope that there's like no special pronunciation or anything to that, because it just reads as Bat Sky Starman. This is a interesting kind of cyberpunk horror story about a guy who's been kind of permanently integrated with the internet and is taking his revenge on the corpo bosses to him. Very simple, straightforward kind of revenge horror story with a lot of the horror elements coming from weird kind of stuff he can do with the internet. Very simple, straightforward story, but I found the art to be pretty strong. It's in black and white, and without putting a lot of details into it, Bat Sky Starman still manages to give us a sense of the grim post-industrial world the characters live in. Let me see if I can find a good, really good page to show that off. And I don't want to show too much of this because it is a very short story. Just looks like 10 or 12 pages. I guess the opening spread here does a pretty good job showing you there. It's black and white, but that is used to good effect, I think, to give a sense of grim, kind of grit to the story, all in all. Flight of the Caged Bird is about a drug trip, literally, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the next one. Flight of the Caged Bird is a slasher story. It's very simple, it's straightforward. Have a person who is in danger, potentially from a supernatural menace, potentially from a mundane serial killer. It has a very good scenario. It has some good red herrings. 4 pages long. Knows what it wants to do. It shows up, it does it, and it gets out. It has all of the things you would expect from genre. Genre fiction, I think, was created to refer to this kind of story. And if this is your genre of story, you're going to love what they do here. I've never been a huge fan of slashers, but I respect the craft and the dedication to genre that went into this one. Finally, we have King Birdie. King Birdie is a story about a drug trip. The imagery, the behavior. I've actually never been around someone who's been high on acid, which these people are. I have been around a lot of drunk people and a couple of people who have been high on much less mind-bending drugs, weed, stuff like that. And I recognize the patterns of behavior here. There's a great job bringing that out. There's some very surrealist imagery brought out by the way we see these people's thoughts warped by being on acid. And it has a suitably horrifying ending. I thought that as a piece exploring a completely altered state of mind, it's really great. I didn't find anything in it that would really inspire me or bring me to write my own kind of story, or even bring me to seek out more of the similar kind of writing. But I could tell what it wanted to do, and I think it did it pretty well. And that's everything in here. Oh, except for the Iron Age media prompts. You can read those online for yourself. So if you're interested in seeing what the Iron Age prompt writing looks like, I would just go check that out directly. You don't really need to hear me talk about it on the interwebs. So all in all, a very broad array of stuff in here again. And I think that, for a themed issue, Richard and Daniel still managed to find a broad smorgasbord of different kinds of stories with kinds of hooks that will be appealing to a wide variety of readers. So, good stuff. Very exciting. Still, spoiler on a cover. I think that is not that big a deal. Again, as I said before, for this kind of a story, for this kind of an issue, if the Prowler of Blog Square was in a issue that wasn't about creature features, it wasn't this Halloween themed issue, maybe that would not have been the best choice. But all in all, it really tells you what this issue is about, and then the issue itself pays off on that very well, in my opinion. Let me know what you think about that. If you've read the issue, if you like the theme, if you don't like the theme, if you don't like spoilers on the cover of your magazine, feel free to discuss in the comments. And while you're down there, there's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit. And I'll talk to you later.